And I would like to read for you from the Rig Vedas, probably the first sunrise service prayer or hymn. I don't have time to read it all, but I thought you might enjoy it. This is from probably about 5,000 years ago. See how the dawns have set up their banners in the eastern half of the sky, adorning and anointing themselves with sunlight for balm. The red gold lights have flown up freely. They sing like women busy at their task, coming from different places with a single harnessed team, bringing refreshing food day after day to the men and women of good action. Like dancing girls, she puts on bright ornaments. Her brilliant flame has become visible once more. She spreads herself out, driving back the formless black abyss. We have crossed to the furthest banks of this darkness. Radiant dawn spreads her web, smiling like a lover. The shining daughter of the sky brings rich gifts. Gazing out over all the creatures, the goddess shines from the distance, facing straight toward every eye, awakening to the motion of everything that lives. She has found the speech of every inspired poet. The ancient goddess, born again and again and again, dresses in the same color. She has awakened, uncovering the very edge of the sky, spreading out her rays like cattle, like a river in full flood. The brightly colored lights shine from the distance. Dawn, you hold the victory prize. Bring us that brightly colored power by which we establish children and grandchildren. May those who awake at the dawn bring here to drink the soma. Well, as most of you know, for the past few months, I have been railing against the government and environmental abuses, and I thought I would calm down a bit. It's better for my blood pressure to do that. I would like to begin by reading a quote from Scott Peck from his Road Less Traveled. By the way, if you haven't read it, it's a great book, and it's in our library right here. But I want this to seep over you and into your consciousness. I quote, "Spiritual growth demands that we actively seek the threatening and unfamiliar and deliberately challenge what we have been taught and hold dear. The path to holiness lies through questioning everything." Scott Peck worked a great deal with his local Catholic diocese. He is no stranger to religion. But he says, seek the threatening and the unfamiliar. Challenge everything you hold dear. Question everything. If we are to grow spiritually, we are challenged to seek that threatening and unfamiliar. A formidable task because uncertainty produces anxiety. Then we are further challenged by that statement to question everything. That is not only a difficult mental task, but it is also an emotional challenge to question everything. It forces us to step outside our personal belief systems and consider alternatives. The scary part of that process is that we are what we think. So if I think differently, I'm going to be a different person. That means I have to give up who I am on the possibility of being something else. And this person is the person I've been for a long time. I'm comfortable with that person. That certainly is threatening and unfamiliar. I bring this up because we are approaching the Easter season. Easter, to me, is another one of those religious seasons that has been so concretized, so formatted, that to question any part of it is blasphemy. And yet, if we don't question, if we don't seek the threatening and the unfamiliar, are we spiritually stunted? Another question that begs to be asked is this. If I travel that same path that everybody else has traveled, I don't get off the path, I don't ask any questions, have I abandoned the path of holiness? The Easter season will be celebrated by millions of Christians all over the globe as one of their high holy days. It celebrates the alleged crucifixion and resurrection of the Jewish reformer, Jesus. We all know the story. We've heard it since we were children. Jesus died for our sins. In watching the electronic church, which I do with some regularity, I am struck by the fact that not only is the same story being told over and over and over exactly the way it was told when I was a child, but the TV preacher still insists on interpreting the message for me as though I am incapable of thinking for myself. They leave absolutely no room for questions. And certainly the only threatening and unfamiliar message is that if I do question, I am lost forever. Is there a thread of spirituality in following robotically all the rituals learned in childhood? Now, granted, there is a strong sense of familiarity, a feeling even of coming home in the rote renditions of childhood ceremony. But is that spirituality? Don't we more often than not confuse familiarity with spirituality? We live in a time of an unprecedented rise in fundamentalism. It seems that everywhere you turn, you are confronted by religious propaganda, from religious marketing campaigns to megachurch preaching, to would-be politicians, to elected officials. Since there is a dramatic rise in fundamentalism, you have to consider the possibility that there is also a sharp decline in spirituality. The likelihood of an inverse relationship must exist if Scott Peck's statement has any validity. Throughout all of history, human beings have struggled to come to some understanding about how the world works. This understanding thus becomes our religion when we try to understand or make sense out of how the world works. Religion, therefore, becomes one's personal understanding of the nature of reality. Most ideas about how the nature of the world works, particularly in the general population, are not generally well thought out. And they are usually prescribed by someone else. Since they offer no threat or uncertainty, we have to question not only their validity, but also if they are the path to holiness. Religion for most people and most parochial groups includes a god or gods, and there's always that inherent idea that you must belong to the right group. Now, what is the right group? It's my group, of course. That is the right group. If you do not belong to the right group and follow the rules of the right group, then you are considered not very religious. You may even be considered as the enemy. The odd thing about that is that these rules preclude the idea that someone outside of my group, say an atheist, for example, could have a highly developed worldview and therefore may have a highly developed sense of morality. The atheist is therefore seen as suspect. He may have evil intent or be misguided, but whatever, he is bound to end up at the top of the list of somebody's prayer list. The unfortunate circumstance of being in the right group and following the right group's rules is that it becomes impossible to transcend the parochial. We're trapped in that. There is no room for exposure to the threatening and the unfamiliar, because if I associate with them, I'm a bad person. A careful observation of history would suggest that most people cannot transcend their culture. They remain trapped in a prison of past conditioning. Our early beliefs may not be true, but they feel so familiar and so comfortable and so well worn in my soul that they are hard to transcend. Belief systems start in a tiny microcosm of the immediate family, mom and dad. That's where these things start. That early familial training starts the precedent to believe in a certain way. And in order to change that belief system, one would have to go out and be exposed to the larger and the larger and the larger world. If, however, a person remains in close proximity to that family belief system, it just keeps getting reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. True spiritual growth is a journey out of our tiny, limited, microcosmic influence group. So it has got to be less than a comfortable journey from the microcosm to the more larger global world. If I grew up in a small Midwestern town or in an Iraqi village and I stayed there, I married there, I had children there, and I associated with my local friends, I'm compelled to think locally. If I did not travel or read or otherwise become exposed to the larger world, I would remain in that prison of conditioning. The outside world would seem threatening and unfamiliar, and those in the outside world would certainly have some different views, some of which I would probably consider disgusting. They would seem pitifully lost and probably need praying for, or else I'd view them as the enemy that must be destroyed. This is exactly and precisely why voters in a large multicultural city would vote different from those people casting votes in rural Kansas. I recently overheard a conversation in a local restaurant, the Cherokee, in which the gentleman sitting at the next table to me said in his Southwest Virginia accent, and I quote, "We just need to go over there and kill them all and take the oil. They don't know what to do with it anyway. Besides, they don't even believe in Jesus." Close quote. It's really hard not to be angry at such florid ignorance. But I realized that that man lacked exposure to anything except his farm, his cattle, his family, his immediate friends. I thought about it, and there was nothing that I could have said or done that would have done anything to change his mind. I would just have further entrenched his views, his racist views, deeper and deeper and deeper. The beginning journey from the microcosm to the global is not a journey of faith. It's not a journey of faith. It's a journey of knowledge. It's a journey of exposure. It requires risking behavior. It requires that I approach things that are unfamiliar. If I stood up in public and I announced that Jesus was probably not crucified, that this is mythology, I would certainly be attacked in some very unpleasant ways. So I'll let Jane do it. If I announced that Jesus' death and resurrection is a non-event, but it is a beautiful metaphor, I would probably be met with a combination of anger and consternation. These statements would fall out of the prevailing parochial view of most people. Therefore, I would disturb their safe, secure little view of how the world works. Most Christians must see the crucifixion and resurrection as an absolute phenomenological event that did occur, rather than a metaphor of something infinitely larger. Spiritual growth requires that we witness the death of some long-cherished beliefs and cultural dictums. We must deliberately challenge constantly who we are if we ever want to achieve who we might want to be. The sacred and the holy are dynamics. They're moving. They're flowing. What is sacred and holy for a child is not necessarily sacred and holy for an adult. It's as though the sacred and the holy are on a continuum. And as we mature, they move along the continuum. To be trapped in some of those beginning levels is to be arrested in childhood and adolescence. There is no such thing as a good hand-me-down religion or a good hand-me-down person. And we are a hand-me-down person if all my beliefs are the same thing that my parents and grandparents and other ancestors believed. That's all I am. I'm a hand-me-down. In a very real and practical way, we must question the religion of our parents and their parents and our peer groups. After all, they had a much more narrow view than we have available to us today. Belief systems have just not kept pace with expanding knowledge. In my opinion, the most wasted hour in America each week is the Sunday school hour. Probably 95% of it is wasted. What you have is you have a case of the blind leading the blind into another generation of biblical illiteracy. Most of these teachers obviously have not studied, for example, history or anthropology or biblical archaeology or mythology or even comparative religions. So what they do is they take this material that they are given and they just follow this material. Now, until the people who are preparing this literature have a broader view, we will continue to perpetuate this isolated parochialism. A world of religious illiterates perpetuates the narrowest of worldviews. This is a prescription for ignorance, hatred, bigotry, and egocentrism. For a religion to be authentic and spiritually inspired, it must be a personal one, forged out of our own experience and our own knowledge. And that knowledge must represent the global information pool, not my little community's information pool. To base a religion on hand-me-down beliefs is to hold on to a child's worldview. The theologian Alan Jones said this, and I quote, "When it comes to questions of meaning, purpose, and death, second-hand information will not do. I cannot survive on second-hand faith or a second-hand God," close quote. Building spirituality, your own spirituality, is very serious business. It requires that we be skeptical about what we've taught, what we've read, what we hear. And in order to be discriminating, we must strive for clarity, insight, and understanding in ourselves. And we must have an ever-increasing knowledge base. This can never be obtained by isolating and immersing oneself in a parochial capsule. I am reminded of one of my graduate school professors who had a very promising career in astronomy. But what he found out in astronomy and astrophysics did not fit with his religious beliefs. So he fixed that. He resigned his position in astronomy and went back to graduate school and took up a completely different field. I always considered him a very bright professor, but it was obvious that his cognitive dissonance between what he was learning and what he believed, there was so much dissonance that he couldn't deal with it. He could not escape from his prison of parochialism. As Easter approaches, we will see individuals relive and reenact ancient rituals and ceremonies that have little to do with spirituality. However, if we go just a little bit deeper, I think there is a core of what I would call species-specific spirituality, something that we can tap into. From the dawning of human time, our species has identified and practiced the rituals of spring's return. We have celebrated the return of the sun, the goddess of spring, the goddess of dawn, the goddess of morning sunrise. These were celebrations of renewal and awakening of the earth's vibrancy. They were earth celebrations that realized that the earth was our mother and a life-giving force. Spirituality comes from that process of being connected to something greater than we are, being a part of something else. This is exactly where such terms as at-one-ment, intonement, intunement come from, being in tune with something greater than we are. In our language, the root of Easter is east, where the sun comes from. In Northern Europe, the word for Easter comes from the root word meaning the dawn. At least 3,000 years before the birth of Jesus, the ancient Hindus tended their morning fires, made sacrifices to the sun, and sang morning songs in praise of the goddess of the dawn. They welcomed the sun's return. Many scholars consider the hymn to the dawn, which I read from a few minutes ago, the most beautiful of all the Vedas. Though it has been parochialized, even the Christian religion celebrates that 5,000-year-old Easter sunrise service. The connection to that life-giving sun and to the dawn reborn is a spiritual connection. It reflects a recognition of our reliance on the radiant sphere that warms us and lights us. To drive away the darkness of ignorance, one must move from the local to the global, embracing the larger and larger and larger world as we mature. To become entrenched in the parochial is to endorse the disenlightenment of humanity. So we approach the time once again when our ancestors celebrated the goddess of resurrection, the goddess responsible for the resurrection of nature after winter's sleep. How can anyone not view the idea of resurrection as a beautiful message? We can be reborn anew each day. We can be reborn each time we change, each time we learn something. This global view is much more profound than a narrow parochial view of a child. See it in its grandest view, and it reveals the mystery of the continuity and continuation of all life. Dr. Paul Scherrer was a Lutheran minister and professor at Union Theological Seminary in New York, and he wrote this: "It is not the function of Easter to underscore the notion that we are immortal. The preachers with this platitude overload religion," close quote. Religious enlightenment is when we step outside our parochial notion and perceive all of life. When we give up the egocentric notion that I personally am so important that some supreme being is listening and watching everything I do and everything I say. He's answering my personal prayers. It is only when I give up that egocentric notion that I can become spiritual and become an integral part of the larger world. As human beings, we are not a special part of this world, but we are a part of the world. It is an unending drama. We all entered the stage on cue, and after a time we will leave the stage, hoping that we have contributed. We are a part of something eternal. Many people believe today that something of us remains after death. Now, there's no way to prove or disprove that idea. Now, it is a pleasant idea, but I am reminded of the UU minister Theodore Parker. He was in Florence, Italy, and he was dying. And just before his death, he said, quote, "You may bury me here in Florence, Italy, but the real Theodore Parker is in Boston, and he will live there forever." Perhaps what remains of us after death is what we contribute. There are millions of great spirits that live long after their death, and their ideas are resurrected in our heads and hearts. And it goes on and on. The spirit of Plato is more alive today than he was in his own time. Theodore Parker lives on with the likes of Socrates, Buddha, Lao Tzu, Jefferson, Lincoln, Spinoza, Schweitzer. Perhaps your parents or grandparents or uncles, along with countless other contributors to humanity, live on. Their ideas resurrected in your head, their dreams resurrected in your head. We follow them. Each member of the human family who has gone on before us is resurrected in us. We carry their genetic material, we carry their atomic particles, and we carry their hopes and dreams and ideas. I think that it is our job to take these universal building blocks and add to them with the knowledge of our time. It's our responsibility to move the human path from the parochial to the global so that our children can follow, and they will move the path even further up the ladder of enlightenment. For humanity to proceed on course, on schedule, we must reverse this invasive parochial trend of fundamentalism. We must return to an age of reason. It is only through a fearless approach to the threatening and unfamiliar that we can truly experience spirituality. All that is holy to us lies just beyond our next question, our next adventure, the next book we read, the next enlightened person we talk to. We must all keep pointing toward the mystery. To sit back and smugly claim to have all the answers is a childhood fantasy. We are, after all, wanderers, dreamers, searchers, explorers. To be afraid of the future, afraid of new discoveries, is to bind ourselves in the dull gray of human existence. So let us all be resurrected in the spirit that has taken humanity this far. Let's not regress into an age of ignorance. Spirituality is in the journey from the parochial to the global. Thank you.